Breaking news! Muhammad never existed. And once Muslims come to grips with this, as they're obviously destined to, Islam will die out. It's just a matter of time now. If you're not aware, there are people who are actually making this argument, or variants of it. And in this video, I'd like to address it, specifically to show how it is by far one of the absolute weakest arguments against Islam, one that is destined to continue having a zero impact on the Muslim world. Alright, let's begin. Claims against the historicity of Muhammad are actually much older than many people think. Elements of it were being made well over a century ago by some Orientalists in Europe. I personally was first introduced to skeptical views of Islam's origins in the 1990s when I read the 1977 book Hagarism, written by Patricia Crone and I believe Michael Cook. If I recall, it's been a while, they did not outright discount the existence of Muhammad, but they cast many doubts concerning Islam's traditional narrative. Since then, an array of authors and activists have picked up and amplified this theme, leading to the grand conclusion that Muhammad never existed, but was rather fabricated to give the Arab empire that conquered much of North Africa and the Middle East in the 7th century a hagiographical foundation story, the Umayyads. The name that appears to be most associated with and is spearheading the argument against Muhammad's existence nowadays is J. Smith, Dr. J. Smith, at least according to the emails I've been receiving and comments being made here on this channel. They often go something like this: "We really like what you've been saying about Islamic history, but you should stop talking about Muhammad because he really never existed. Please see the works of Dr. J. Smith." To be honest with you, from my first brush with it as a student in the 1990s, I've never been much interested in this Muhammad never existed argument, and we'll get into why. But I've decided to address it in this video for two important and related reasons. First, to shed light on why it is such a weak polemic against Islam, and if anything, serves only as a distraction. And two, in so doing, shedding light on the subtle and inner workings of history, to look essentially at the psychological and epistemological aspects of history, why humans believe what they believe about the past, which I think is fascinating and possibly instructive for you. Let's start with me laying out my personal beliefs concerning Muhammad, whether he existed or not. I believe in the bare-bone facts of his biography. I believe that sometime in the early 7th century, a man claiming to be a prophet arose in Arabia and became dominant through warfare. Why do I believe this? Because we have several remarkably early references to his existence, and all by non-Muslims. Let's begin with arguably the most important of all these, the Doctrina Jacobi, which documents a dialogue that took place on July 13th, 634, a mere 2 years after Muhammad's death. Justus, one of the participants of this dialogue, writes that his brother Abraham, quote, wrote to me saying that a deceiving prophet appeared amidst the Saracens. Saracens means Arabs. Justus then says that his brother Abraham, who was at the time living near Arabia, referred the matter to an old Jewish scribe. "What do you tell me, Lord and teacher, concerning the prophet who has appeared among the Saracens?" Abraham asks the elderly gentleman. "And the scribe told me with much groaning," continues Abraham, "he is deceiving." This is now the elderly gentleman talking. He says, "He is deceiving, for do prophets come with swords and chariot? Verily, these events of today are works of confusion." Afterwards, Abraham decided to investigate the matter personally. He writes, "So I, Abraham, inquired and heard from those who had met him that there was no truth to be found in the so-called prophet, only the shedding of men's blood. He says also that he has the keys of paradise, which is incredible." Now, Muhammad is first mentioned by name in a Syriac fragment, also written around 634, again, 2 years after his death. Only scattered phrases are intelligible. It reads, quote, "Many villages were ravaged by the killing of Muhammad, and many people were slain and taken prisoner from Galilee to Beth. Some 10,000 other Christians were slaughtered in the vicinity of Damascus." The translators put in brackets to help make this more intelligible the following words so that it reads, quote, "Many villages in Homs were ravaged by the killing of the followers of Muhammad," etc. Writing around 640, Thomas the Presbyter, a Syriac Christian, also confirms that, quote, "There was a battle," he's probably referring to Ajnadin, "between the Romans and the Arabs of Muhammad in Palestine, 12 miles east of Gaza. The Romans fled. Some 4,000 poor villagers of Palestine were killed there. The Arabs ravaged the whole region. They climbed the mountain of Mardon and killed many monks there in the monasteries of Kedara Benata." The Coptic bishop John of Niku, who was likely alive during the Muslim conquest of Egypt around 640-641, refers to Islam as, quote, "the detestable doctrine of the beast, that is, Muhammad." All these quotes I read to you come from these two books, and I'm sure there are in other books, but these are the books that I have in my collection. The Expansion of the Early Islamic State, edited by Fred M. Donner, and Seeing Islam as Others Saw It, a survey and evaluation of Christian, Jewish, and Zoroastrian writings on early Islam by Robert G. Hoyland. Again, these are all very early and definitive references to Muhammad and a prophet in Arabia, dating from between 2 and 8 years from his death. That is amazingly early by the standards of history, and I'm not sure, but would be very curious to learn, how the naysayers who claim Muhammad never existed get past such references. If you know, tell me in the comments. Now, to underscore just how important the aforementioned references to Muhammad are, and by way of comparison, keep in mind that we don't have anything written as early as between 2 and 8 years of Christ's lifetime. The earliest non-Christian references to Christ were written many decades following his crucifixion. Josephus, about 60 years, Pliny the Younger, about 79 years, and Tacitus, 83 years. Again, I find it amazing that whereas Christians rightfully cite Josephus, Pliny, and Tacitus as early proof of Christ's existence, the references to Muhammad, which objectively speaking are even more compelling, having been written much closer to their subject's lifetime, 2 years, not 60, are dismissed as irrelevant by those who would make him a figment of our imagination. Okay, there's another very important reason I believe a Muhammad figure existed. How else does one understand the Sunni-Shia divide of history? Think about it. If Muhammad is a later fabrication meant to give credibility and a hagiographical veneer to the Arab conquerors of the Middle East and North Africa, the Umayyads, how does one understand the Sunni-Shia conflict, which revolves entirely around not just the existence of a prophet named Muhammad, but his very DNA? Following Muhammad's death in 632, 2 contending Muslim groups emerged and continue to exist. Sunnis, who represent the majority and who believe that any qualified candidate is eligible to becoming Muhammad's successor or caliph, and the Shias, the minority, who believe that only blood descendants of Muhammad could be his successors, particularly through his daughter Fatima and his first cousin Ali, namely Muhammad's grandsons Hassan and Hussein, and their progeny. For centuries, since around 680, Sunnis and Shias have been killing each other over this point. Now let me ask you, if there was no Muhammad, then there was no Fatima. And if there was no Fatima, there was no Hassan and no Hussein. So who are the Shias, and what is their gripe? What event gave rise to them? Did the Umayyad conspirators who concocted Muhammad also compel their own descendants to start butchering each other? And to what end exactly? It's again for all these reasons that, as far as I'm concerned, the bare-bone facts of Muhammad's biography, that a man claiming to be a prophet and promising paradise to his militant followers, are, by the standards of history, not to mention common sense, amply attested. Having said all that, I do not necessarily believe in those many details contained in the vast corpus of Islam scriptures, from Ibn Ishaq's Sirah, or biography of Muhammad, to the countless volumes of Hadith, which Muslims believe contain the detailed doings and teachings of their prophet. These I obviously take with a grain of salt, meaning I have no idea whether they are true or false, and can only judge their plausibility on an individual basis. That said, and while we're at it, it's worth mentioning that the Hadith actually do help verify the existence of Muhammad, even if indirectly. For those who don't know, the Hadith, ahadith in Arabic plural, are vast collections of what Muhammad reportedly said or did as passed down orally. Because they were finally written down between 120 to 250 years following Muhammad's death, those now raising questions concerning his existence dismiss them as being too late and therefore obvious forgeries. Ironically, however, much of what they do contain is very unflattering to Muhammad. Now, if they are fake and meant to help fabricate a heroic-like and noble prophet to validate the Arab Empire, shouldn't they only contain information designed to make Muhammad appear in the best of lights? Instead, they contain many oddities, putting it mildly, that have for centuries challenged the faith of Muslims, not a few of whom till this very day cite them as cause for their apostasy from Islam. Off the top of my head, for example, there's one canonical hadith, meaning its authenticity has been confirmed by the ulama, where Muhammad recommends that women breastfeed strange men as a way of making them family members, whom the women no longer need cover themselves around. The Sirah also has Muhammad engaging in deception, ordering the brutal assassination of old men, mothers, for simply mocking him, and marrying the wives of men he had or were killed on the field of battle. Such accounts have a ring of truth to them, not only because accurate accounts of historical figures will at least occasionally show some of their warts, but what we know about Muhammad from the earliest sources, A propensity for war, vengeance, and sexual licentiousness further confirm the unflattering accounts of the Sirah and Hadith. So much for why I believe a Muhammad figure existed. In another video, we'll evaluate the counter-arguments against Muhammad's existence. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments. What do you make of those very early non-Muslim references to a false prophet that I quoted? And how do you explain the Sunni-Shia divide, which was originally about not just Muhammad, but his very DNA?